All right, folks, get ready for a deep dive. Today, we're going where things get kind of wonderfully weird.
Oh, yeah, buckle up.
You know, you guys wanted to explore the mind of Duncan Trussell,
Of course.
the comedic philosopher who's always hanging out with Joe Rogan. And you want to see how his ideas, like, connect with the law of one. That whole, we're all one consciousness thing. So 10 JRE episodes with Duncan and all 5 books of the RAM material. That's
a lot.
a lot to unpack, but hey, here we are.
Yeah, it's fascinating how Duncan, even when he's, cracking jokes, he keeps coming back to this idea. This idea that our, everyday reality is just like the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Like, remember in episode 1330,
Yeah.
he's talking about that flat earth theory.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
As ridiculous as it is,
Right.
it forces us to actually question what we believe. What we
Yeah.
believe about the universe.
It's that broccoli experience.
Yes.
Where he's like, imagine the consciousness of a vegetable. Even the mundane stuff could be way more profound than we realize.
Exactly. And that connects to the law of one, that central principle.
Yeah.
All is one.
Right.
It's not just, some hippie slogan.
Right.
It's suggesting that all of reality is part of a single unified consciousness.
Right.
From, galaxies down to broccoli flores.
No.
Our individual perceptions, what we think is real, that's just a tiny slice of the pie.
So are we saying, like, Duncan's comedy is accidentally channeling some, like, ancient alien wisdom?
Well, not quite. But
Right.
what's interesting is how the law of one describes our reality, as this kind of learning experience, a grand stage for souls to evolve. And, Duncan on JRE talks about reality being a simulation, like in episode 1536. Now, whether you take that literally or metaphorically,
Right.
it raises the question, what are we learning here?
Yeah. And that leads us right into the law of one's big thing, service to others. It's almost like cosmic karma, right?
Yeah.
The more you focus on helping others, the higher you climb on this spiritual ladder.
Yeah.
But how does that square with Duncan's, sometimes dark humor?
Yeah, on the surface, they seem worlds apart.
Right.
But if you listen closely, you can hear this deep empathy in Duncan's comedy. Like in episode 1158, his rant about decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms,
Yeah.
it's fueled by this belief that they can awaken compassion on a global scale.
Right.
That's a pretty profound act of service, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely not your typical stand-up routine. And then there's all the stuff Duncan says about, like societal ills, systems of power that are messed up. It's funny, but it also makes you think, man, are we heading down a dark path?
Yeah, that darkness is something both Duncan and the law of one address head on. Duncan, in that biting way of his, talks about how sociopaths are drawn to positions of power. Remember in episode 1445, he was joking about how even seemingly positive figures like Obama
Right.
grapple with incredibly difficult decisions.
Yeah, like, are we all just pawns in a game orchestrated by the, like, power hungry? Is that the simulation Duncan's worried about?
Well, the law of one has this concept of the Orion group, which are basically negative entities,
Right.
seeking to control, seeking to enslave others. But they also emphasize that negativity exists. Negativity exists within each of us. It's this shadow self that we all have to grapple with.
So it's less about some external evil cabal and more about the choices we make individually. Like, are we going to feed the shadow or try to rise above it?
That's the crux of it. And it's fascinating how this choice plays out. In Duncan's storytelling, he often talks about this story where he met the Dalai Lama.
Oh, yeah.
Dalai Lama gave him this simple advice. You can always be kinder.
You can always be kinder. Such a simple phrase, but it really stuck with him. And the way Duncan interprets it, seeing unkindness is like an echo of past suffering. That's where the law of one's emphasis on forgiveness comes in, right? It's about breaking free from these cycles of negativity.
It's not about ignoring the darkness. It's not about pretending it doesn't exist.
Right.
But rather it's about understanding, understanding its origins and choosing a different path.
Speaking of different paths, one thing that keeps popping up in both Duncan's work and the law of one is this idea that our perception of time is, well, kind of messed up.
You're right. Duncan, in several episodes, jokes about time being a flat circle,
Yeah.
riffing on that idea from True Detective.
Right.
The law of one, meanwhile, takes it a step further, suggesting that time as we experience it
Yeah.
is a construct of our limited consciousness.
So they're saying we're trapped in this linear time trap.
Yeah.
But what happens when we, like, break free? Do we get to time travel?
Not exactly. The law of one suggests that as we evolve,
Yeah.
spiritually,
Right.
we become less fixated on the past and future. We start experiencing a more expansive now, where memories of past lives and glimpses of potential futures become accessible. It's less about, zipping around in a DeLorean
Right.
and more about perceiving time. Perceiving time as this fluid, interconnected thing.
Okay, that's mind-bending.
Yeah.
Even for this show.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how both Duncan and the Law of One approach, like the big question, are we alone in the universe?
Yeah, Duncan loves riffing about aliens.
Oh, yeah?
In episode 1642, he's joking about encountering the Greys.
The Greys.
Over the ice wall at the edge of a flat Earth. It's hilarious, but it also points to this deeper curiosity
Right.
about what other forms of intelligent life might be out there.
Right. But the Law of One takes a more matter-of-fact approach.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. They describe a universe teeming with consciousness,
Well,
with beings existing at different levels of spiritual evolution.
Right.
Some are benevolent, some are more self-serving, just like here on Earth. It's a cosmic drama playing out on a grand scale.
and speaking of drama, both Duncan and the Law of One seem to emphasize this idea that we're not just passive observers,
Yeah.
In this cosmic play. We actually have the power to influence the plot through our choices.
That's the concept of free will.
Right.
And it's one that both sources grapple with,
Yeah.
in interesting ways. Duncan in episode 1288 talks about how social media algorithms, they're basically hacking our free will.
Yeah.
Turning us into, puppets of technology.
Like, are we really making choices, or are we just responding to, program stimuli? Is free will just an illusion?
That's where the Law of One gets really nuanced.
Yeah.
They suggest that free will operates. Free will operates within a framework of cosmic laws and principles.
Right.
We have the power to choose, but those choices have consequences. It's like, you're driving a car.
Yeah.
You can steer, but you still have to follow the rules of the road.
So it's not about doing whatever we want, but rather making choices that are in alignment with our highest purpose.
Exactly.
With the greater good.
And both sources emphasize the importance of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And understanding our motivations. Duncan, in that classic way of his, talks about looking at things for what they really are, even if it's not flattering.
Right.
It's about being honest with ourselves, questioning our assumptions, and making choices that are truly aligned with our values.
This is deep stuff, but it's also incredibly empowering. It's like we have the power to create our reality, to shape our destiny, both individually and collectively.
And this brings us back to that idea of service to others. The Law of One suggests that the more we align our will with the will of the Creator,
Right.
which they describe as a force of love and unity. The more we contribute to the positive evolution of the cosmos.
So it's not just about helping people in need or volunteering our time. It's about making choices from a place of love.
Yes.
Compassion, understanding.
Exactly. And Duncan, in his own unique way, embodies this principle. His humor often disarms our defenses, allowing us to connect with the shared human experience, to see ourselves in others, to recognize the absurdity of our divisions.
It's like he's using laughter to bridge the gaps, bridge the gaps between us, to remind us that we're all in this together, stumbling and bumbling our way through the mysteries of life.
And in those shared stumbles and bumbles, we find,
we find the humor, the connection, the love. That makes it all worthwhile.
So are we saying Duncan Trussell is like a secret law of one guru?
Not quite. But what's fascinating is how this unique blend of humor and philosophical inquiry intersects with some of the Law of One's core principles. It's a testament to the universality of these truths that can be found, in the most unexpected places, even amidst the laughter of a comedy podcast. You mentioned, like scratching the surface before. And it's true. One thing that both Duncan and the Law of One keep coming back to is this idea of spiritual evolution. It's not just about, being good.
Yeah.
in the everyday sense. It's like there's a whole other level to this game we're playing.
Okay, so Duncan, he jokes about us being like God and drag, like we're these divine beings, but just like messing around in human form.
Right. And then the law of one, they get super detailed
Yeah.
about, densities and dimensions, like it's this cosmic ladder
Yeah.
that we're all climbing. But what's the go AL here? Are
Yeah.
we like we're trying to escape this whole messy reality or something?
It's not about escape. It's about, it's about becoming more. The law of one talks about becoming more like the creator, which they describe as pure love, wisdom, and compassion. Not some bearded guy in the sky,
Right.
but the very, very essence of those qualities.
So it's less about earning, like brownie points for good deeds.
Yeah.
And more about embodying these qualities like in our very being.
Exactly. And you see this reflected,
Yeah.
in Duncan's work. Even when he's being, goofy, like in episode 1482, he's talking about how important it is to see the divine spark in others, even the people who just drive you crazy.
Yeah.
That's a pretty law of one way of looking at things.
It's definitely not your typical like punch down
Yeah.
comedy. And it makes me think about how both Duncan and the Law of One, how they deal with the really tough stuff, like, like societal conditioning. We're just bombarded, right?
Oh, yeah.
With messages about who we should be, what to buy, how to think. It's like we're born into this matrix of expectations.
Yeah, Duncan, being Duncan, tackles this head on. In episode 1094, he's got this whole bit about the lingering effects of Puritanism on our views about sex. That's hilarious. But it also points to, how deeply ingrained these societal programs, how deeply ingrained they can be.
Yeah. And the Law of One, this suggests that a lot of our societal structures are actually designed to keep us trapped.
Yeah.
In fear.
Yeah.
Scarcity and separation. It's like they want us to stay asleep, right?
That's a pretty stark way of putting it. But there's truth to it. The Law of One, they encourage us to question these systems, to seek a higher truth. And Duncan, in his own way, is doing just that. He's using humor to deconstruct those narratives, to make us laugh at the absurdity of it all.
It's like he's sneaking in these profound truths under the guise of entertainment. Remember that bit about the media? Acting like a queen bee, releasing like pheromones of fear to prepare us for war. It's funny, but it's also like terrifyingly accurate.
Yeah, and that brings us to another crucial point: individual empowerment. Both Duncan and the Law of One, they emphasize the power of choice. We're not just passive victims of circumstance. We have the agency to choose a different path, to break free from those limiting beliefs.
Okay, but how do we actually de-owe that?
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Like
Yeah.
the odds are stacked against us. Where do we even begin?
Well, the Law of One suggests that aligning ourselves with the principles of love, compassion, and service to others is key. It's about transcending the ego's desire for control and embracing a more expansive worldview.
And Duncan, in his own way, echoes this. Remember his plea for decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms. He sees them as a tool for expanding consciousness and fostering a sense of unity and compassion, which is in itself an act of service.
It's a radical proposition, but one that aligns with the Law of One's, emphasis on seeking knowledge, seeking wisdom as pathways to spiritual evolution. They suggest that certain substances can act as, like catalysts for growth, helping us break free from limiting beliefs and access higher states of consciousness.
But we're talking about plant medicine as a tool for like hacking the matrix. That's some next level stuff.
Yeah.
But it also sounds a bit risky.
It definitely requires caution and respect. The Law of One stresses the importance of intention and discernment when working with any kind of transformative experience. It's not about seeking a quick fix or an escape from reality, but rather a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
It's like we need to be mindful of the tools we use and the paths we choose, right? There are no shortcuts to enlightenment, but there are many ways to get lost along the way. Which makes me think about the Law of One's, like views on relationships. Duncan is brutally honest about the messiness of it all, but there's also this deep yearning for connection, that shines through.
That's a great observation. And it ties into the law of one's teachings about balancing,
Yeah.
balancing self-love with compassion for others. They don't present relationships as some, some blissful utopia,
Mhm.
but rather as opportunities for learning and growth,
Mhm.
often through friction and challenges.
Duncan definitely isn't afraid to like dive into the, like shadows of relationships. Remember that story, the story he told about accidentally confessing to a woman that he had been fantasizing about her
Yeah.
during sex.
Yeah.
Mortifying, but also kind of endearing.
It's that willingness to be vulnerable, to expose his own flaws that makes him so relatable, and it aligns with the law of one's, emphasis on authenticity and
Yeah.
honesty, even when it's,
Even when it's uncomfortable.
it's like they're both encouraging us to drop the masks, right?
Yeah.
To show up as our messy, imperfect selves, and to embrace the full spectrum of human experience.
And through that embrace, through that radical acceptance, we find connection, we find love, we find meaning, even
Yeah.
in the midst, even in the midst of chaos
Yeah.
and uncertainty. This is getting pretty deep,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly liberating. It's like they're both giving us permission to be, to be fully human,
Yeah.
to laugh and cry, to stumble and rise, to embrace the paradox of it all.
And that sense of playfulness, that willingness to find humor in the midst of it all, that's something that both Duncan and the Law of One, that's something they both emphasize.
Duncan's whole comedic style is built on that, right?
Yeah.
Finding the absurdity in the everyday, the cosmic joke hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And the Law of One suggests that joy and
Yeah.
laughter are essential components of spiritual growth. They encourage us to approach life with a sense of lightness and playfulness, even amidst the challenges.
It's like they're reminding us that
Yeah.
life is a game, a
Yeah.
cosmic dance. It's not about, taking ourselves too seriously, but rather embracing the absurdity and finding the humor in it all. Speaking of embracing the absurdity, both Duncan and the Law of One have some pretty wild things to say about the nature of time.
That's right. Duncan loves to riff about time being a flat circle, playing with that idea from True Detective. And the Law of One suggests that our linear perception of time, it's just a construct of our limited consciousness.
So are they saying we can bend time, travel through it? Is that what happens when we reach a higher density?
It's less about, physically manipulating time and more about shifting our perception of it. The Law of One suggests that in higher densities, time becomes more fluid, more malleable. We can access memories from past lives and even glimpse potential futures.
Okay, that's some seriously mind-bending stuff.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think about how we approach, history. The
Yeah.
whole narrative of human civilization. Duncan seems pretty skeptical of the official story,
Yeah.
always questioning the accepted timeline and digging for, alternative interpretations.
And the Law of One acknowledges that our understanding of history is often,
Yeah.
limited and distorted. They suggest that there have been many cycles of civilization on Earth, and much of that knowledge has been lost or suppressed.
So we're not just talking about ancient aliens building pyramids,
Right.
but a whole hidden history
Mm-hmm.
of humanity
Yeah.
that's been buried beneath the surface.
Exactly. And they encourage us to question the narratives, the narratives we've been given, to seek out alternative perspectives, and to piece together, a more holistic understanding, of our past. Which leads us to another question that both Duncan and the Law of One, that both of them grapple with: the nature of truth itself.
In a world, overflowing with information, misinformation, disinformation, it can be hard to know what to believe. That Duncan is constantly challenging us to think critically, to question everything, even our own assumptions.
And the Law of One encourages us to use our intuition and our discernment as compasses,
Mhm.
to listen to the whispers of our hearts, and to trust the wisdom that resides within us.
It's about becoming our own authorities, right? Not blindly following dogma, or external experts, but rather cultivating a sense of inner knowing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And both sources emphasize the importance of, being open.
Yeah.
Being open to new information, to different perspectives, even to ideas that challenge our existing beliefs.
It's about embracing, like embracing the mystery,
Yeah.
the unknown, and recognizing that our understanding is always evolving, which makes me think about, how both Duncan and the Law of One, how they deal with the idea of societal conditioning. We're bombarded with messages about who we should be, what to buy, how
Yeah.
to think. It's like, we're born into this matrix. This is matrix of expectations.
And Duncan, being Duncan, tackles this head on. In one of his JRE appearances, he's got this whole bit about the lingering effects,
Yeah.
the lingering effects of Puritanism on our views about sex. It's hilarious, but it also points to how deeply ingrained, how deeply ingrained these societal programs, how
Right.
deeply ingrained they can be.
Right. And the Law of One suggests that a lot of our societal structures are actually designed to keep us trapped in fear, scarcity,
Mm.
and separation. It's like, they want us to stay asleep.
That's a pretty stark way of putting it, but there's a truth to it, The Law of One encourages us to question these systems, to seek a higher truth. And Duncan, in his own way, is doing just that. He's using humor to deconstruct those narratives, to make us laugh at the absurdity of it all.
It's like he's sneaking in these profound truths under the guise of entertainment. Remember that bit about the media acting like a queen bee, releasing pheromones of fear to prepare us for war? It's funny, but it's also terrifyingly accurate.
And that brings us to another crucial point: individual empowerment. Both Duncan and the Law of One emphasize the power of choice. We're not just passive victims of circumstance. We have the agency to choose a different path, to break free from those limiting beliefs.
Okay, but how do we actually DO that? It's easy to feel overwhelmed, like the odds are stacked against us.
Mhm.
Where do we even begin?
The Law of One suggests that aligning ourselves with the principles of love, compassion, and service to others is key. It's about transcending the ego's desire for control and embracing a more expansive worldview.
And Duncan, in his own way, echoes this sentiment. Remember his passionate plea for decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms? He sees them as a tool for expanding consciousness and fostering a sense of unity and compassion, which is, in itself, an act of service.
It's a radical proposition, but one that aligns with the Law of One's emphasis on seeking knowledge and wisdom as pathways to spiritual evolution. They suggest that certain substances can act as catalysts for growth, helping us to break free from limiting beliefs and access higher states of consciousness.
So we're talking about plant medicine as a tool for hacking the matrix. That's some next-level stuff. But it also sounds a bit risky.
It definitely requires caution and respect. The Law of One stresses the importance of intention and discernment when working with any kind of transformative experience. It's not about seeking a quick fix or an escape from reality, but rather a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
It's like we need to be mindful of the tools we use and the paths we choose. There are no shortcuts to enlightenment, but there are many ways to get lost along the way, which makes me think about one of the most fundamental mysteries of life: death. Duncan often jokes about our meat suits having expiration dates, but there's also a genuine curiosity about what happens after we die.
That's a topic that's often shrouded in fear and mystery, but both sources approach it with remarkable clarity and compassion. Duncan, in his typical fashion, uses humor to diffuse the tension, but beneath the laughter, there's a genuine curiosity about what happens after we die. The Law of One, on the other hand, offers a more structured framework for understanding death, describing it not as an ending, but as a transition.
A transition to what, exactly?
The Law of One describes a system of spiritual evolution that unfolds across multiple densities or dimensions of existence. After death, they suggest, our souls are drawn to the level that aligns with our vibration, our level of consciousness. It's less about a judgmental God sending us to a specific place and more about our own choices and actions determining our trajectory.
So basically, karma is cosmic GPS, guiding us to our next destination.
In a way, yes. The Law of One suggests that we create our own reality through our thoughts, actions, and intentions, both in this life and beyond. Death is simply a transition point, a moment of reckoning where we review our experiences and choose our next steps on the evolutionary ladder. And that makes me think about how both Duncan and the Law of One talk about psychic attacks. It sounds woo-woo, but Duncan's had some experiences, especially with overly enthusiastic fans.
It's like being a good person makes you a target for some kind of energy vampires. Doesn't seem fair.
Well, the law of one suggests that those who radiate light and love can become targets for negative entities who see it as a threat. But they also offer guidance on how to protect ourselves.
So do we need to start wearing garlic necklaces and carrying wood stakes?
Not quite. They emphasize the importance of maintaining a strong and balanced energy field through practices like meditation, visualization, and surrounding ourselves with positive intentions.
And Duncan, in his own way, echoes this advice. He often talks about the importance of mindfulness and self-care as ways to strengthen our resilience and navigate the challenges of modern life.
It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace and grounding ourselves in our own truth. The more centered and aligned we are, the less susceptible we become to external influences.
It's not about building walls to keep out the darkness, but rather strengthening our inner light so that it can't be extinguished. Which brings me to something else that's been on my mind. Both Duncan and the Law of One talk about this idea of interconnectedness, of us all being part of a larger organism.
It's a powerful concept, and one that both sources explore in fascinating ways. Duncan often uses the analogy of a hive mind, suggesting that we're all interconnected, even if we're not always aware of it.
Yeah, he jokes about humanity being a schizophrenic hive with all its conflicting impulses and competing ideologies. It's hilarious, but it also highlights the disconnect between our individual experience and the reality of our interconnectedness.
And the Law of One echoes this sentiment, suggesting that we're all part of a unified consciousness, each of us contributing to the evolution of the whole. They emphasize the importance of recognizing this interconnectedness and acting in ways that benefit not just ourselves, but all beings.
But how do we shift from an egocentric perspective to a more collective consciousness?
Yeah.
It's like we're wired for self-preservation, to put our own needs first. How do we break free from that programming?
The Law of One suggests that the key lies in cultivating love and compassion. They describe love as the most powerful force in the universe, a unifying energy that dissolves the barriers of separation and connects us at the deepest level.
And Duncan, in his own way, embodies this principle. His humor often disarms our defenses, allowing us to connect with the shared human experience, to see ourselves in others, and to recognize the absurdity of our divisions.
It's like he's using laughter as a bridge, inviting us to step outside of our limited perspectives and embrace a more expansive view of reality.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together, sharing this cosmic journey, stumbling and bumbling our way through the mysteries of life. And in those shared stumbles and bumbles, we find the humor, the connection, the love that makes it all worthwhile.
It's a beautiful message and one that resonates deeply with me. It's like, we're all just crazy monkey people trying to figure things out, and the best way to do that is together, with a sense of humor and a whole lot of art.
That's a perspective worth holding on to. And as we continue our deep dive into the world of Duncan Trussell and the Law of One, I'm excited to explore how we can cultivate more love, compassion, and interconnectedness in our own lives and in the world around us. But before we get too warm and fuzzy, let's talk about power. It's a word that can trigger a lot of different reactions, especially considering how much both Duncan and the Law of One emphasize service to others.
You're right. It seems paradoxical, doesn't it? On one hand, we're encouraged to embrace a selfless path, to focus on the well-being of others. But then there's this awareness of the corrupting influence of power, the potential for even well-intentioned individuals to become entangled in systems that perpetuate harm.
Duncan doesn't shy away from this tension. He's constantly questioning the nature of authority, poking fun at those who seek power, and highlighting the absurdity of blind obedience.
And the Law of One, while not directly addressing political systems, offers a framework for ethical leadership through their concept of service to others. It's not about lording over others or controlling them, but rather empowering them and working together for the collective good.
It's about recognizing that true power lies not in external authority, but in our own hearts and minds. It's about aligning ourselves with the principles of love, compassion, and wisdom, and using our voices and actions to create a more just and equitable world. Which leads us to another big question. How do we reconcile the idea of free will with the Law of One's concept of a predetermined plan?
That's a great question, and it's one that both sources grapple with in interesting ways. Duncan, in his comedic explorations, often plays with the idea that our choices might be predetermined, that we're all just puppets dancing on strings.
Yeah, he's got this whole bit about the human AI being hacked by external forces like social media algorithms. It's funny, but it also makes you question whether we're truly in control of our own destiny.
And the law of one acknowledges the complexity of free will, suggesting that it operates within a framework of cosmic laws and principles. They describe it as a delicate balance between our individual choices and the influence of our environment, our past karma, and the guidance of our higher selves.
Totally.
We're driving the car, but there's a GPS system guiding us, and maybe a few backseat drivers offering suggestions, but ultimately we're the ones behind the wheel.
Okay, that makes sense. But if we're really trying to evolve spiritually, to become more, more like the creator, how do we know which path to choose? There are so many different, spiritual traditions, philosophies, practices. It's easy to get lost in the maze.
The law of one emphasizes, that there are many paths to the summit of the mountain, and each individual must find what resonates with their soul. They encourage us to use our discernment, to listen to our intuition, and to trust the guidance of our higher selves.
And Duncan, in his own way, echoes this. He's always, like exploring different spiritual practices, from meditation to psychedelics to shamanism. He's not afraid to experiment, to try new things, to see what works for him.
It's about being open to different perspectives, to different ways of knowing and experiencing the divine. And it's about recognizing that our understanding, it's always evolving. What might have resonated with us, at one point in our journey might no longer serve us as we grow and expand.
It's like we're constantly shedding old skins, outgrowing old beliefs, and stepping into new versions, new versions of ourselves. Which makes me think about something that both Duncan and the Law of One talk about: the importance of facing our shadows.
That's right. Duncan, with his dark humor, often shines a light on our less than noble impulses, the ways in which we sabotage ourselves, the destructive patterns we repeat. And the Law of One, while acknowledging the existence of negativity and darkness, suggests that these shadows are simply aspects of ourselves that need to be integrated and healed.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, that we all have the capacity for both darkness and light.
Exactly. It's not about denying or suppressing, those shadow aspects, but rather bringing them into the light. Into the light of awareness, understanding them and integrating them into our wholeness.
It's about, embracing the fullness of our being, the good, the bad, the ugly, and finding compassion for ourselves and others in the process. And that compassion, that empathy, that willingness to see the divine spark in everyone, that's what ultimately fuels the Law of One's concept of service to others.
You're right, and Duncan, in his own way, embodies this principle. His humor often serves as a catalyst for empathy and understanding, breaking down barriers and reminding us of our shared humanity. But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? Both Duncan and the Law of One acknowledge the existence of, negative forces, of entities that seek to control and manipulate.
Yeah. The Orion group, right? That concept still kind of freaks me out.
It can definitely sound like something straight out of the science fiction movie. But the Law of One suggests that these negative entities are real and they operate in subtle ways, often preying on our fears and insecurities. It's like a cosmic game of chess where the stakes are incredibly high.
So how do we protect ourselves? Do we need to build some kind of psychic shield or carry around a garlic necklace?
The Law of One emphasizes that the most powerful protection is love and light. They suggest that, that negative entities, they thrive in darkness, in fear, in separation. But when we cultivate, love, compassion, and unity within ourselves and in our communities, we create, we create a frequency that repels those negative influences.
And Duncan, in his own way, echoes this sentiment. He often talks about the importance of, mindfulness, being aware of our thoughts and emotions, choosing love over fear. He sees humor as a powerful tool for dismantling those negative thought patterns and raising our vibration.
It's about remembering that we have the power to choose which frequencies we align with, which energies we feed. We're not just passive victims of circumstance. We have agency, we have choice, we have the power to create to
Right.
create our reality.
This is powerful stuff. And it
Mm.
makes me think about how both Duncan and the Law of One, how they approach the idea of spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving some blissful state of enlightenment
Mm.
or escaping the messiness of human experience. It's about becoming more conscious, more aware, more aligned with our true nature.
Exactly. It's about, it's about waking up to the reality of who we are. Those divine sparks of consciousness playing out different roles and experiences across lifetimes. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things and embracing the journey of becoming more,
Yeah.
becoming more like the creator.
It's a journey that's both challenging and exhilarating, full of twists and turns, laughter and tears. But it's a journey worth taking. And you know what? I think Duncan and the Law of One would agree that humor is an essential part of that journey.
Absolutely. Laughter is a powerful tool for healing, for transformation, for connection. It allows us to see the absurdity in our struggles, to find lightness in the darkness, to remember that we're not alone. We're not alone in this cosmic dance.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with one final question.
Yeah.
One final question for you. Does humor help or hinder your own spiritual seeking? Is it a distraction? A distraction from the serious business,
Yeah.
the serious business of enlightenment, or is it an integral part of the path?
That's a great question to ponder, and I think the answer is different for everyone. But for me, humor is a reminder that even in the midst of the most profound mysteries, there's always room for joy, for laughter, for a sense of playfulness, and maybe, just maybe, that playfulness is what allows us to access those deeper truths, to see the world with fresh eyes, and to embrace the journey with a light heart.
Well said. And to all you listeners out there, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the mind of Duncan Trussell and the wisdom of the Law of One. We hope you found some nuggets of insight, some moments of laughter, and maybe even a spark, a spark of inspiration to fuel your own cosmic journey. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Adonai.